Welcome to Snoozecast, the podcast designed to help you fall asleep. If you enjoy our show, please write us a review on the podcast app. Also, share us with a friend. Find us on snoozecast.com and follow us on social media and wherever you listen to podcasts. This episode is brought to you by our Patreon supporters and by Greener Pastures. Tonight, we'll read part 7 of the classic children's story Heidi, published in 1881 by Swiss author Johanna Spyri. If you'd like to start from the beginning, you'll find that the very first episode aired on March 8th, 2019. If you'd like to listen to the last episode before this one, it aired on July 13th, 2020. Heidi is a novel about the life of a young girl in her grandfather's care in the Swiss Alps. Heidi is one of the best-selling books ever written and is among the best-known works of Swiss literature. We will pick up at the start of Chapter 8. In the last episode, Heidi has only been living in Frankfurt at the Grand Sesamon house for a day, but she is already missing her mountain home with her grandfather. She mistakes the sound of the street coaches for the wind racing through fir trees and runs outside. The stern Miss Rottenmeier has been trying to figure out a way to send Heidi back where she came from. Let's get cozy. Close your eyes. Relax your body into the softness of your bed. Now, take a few deep breaths. Chapter 8. Great Disturbances in the Sesamon house. A short time after the tutor had arrived next morning, the doorbell rang so violently that Sebastian thought it must be Mr. Sesamon himself. What was his surprise when a dirty street boy with a barrel organ on his back stood before him. "What do you mean by pulling the bell like that?" the butler said. "I want to see Clara." "Can't you at least say Miss Clara, you ragged urchin?" said Sebastian harshly. "She owes me 40 pennies, said the boy. "You're crazy. How do you know Miss Clara even lives here?" "I showed her the way home yesterday, and she promised to give me 40 pennies. "What nonsense. Miss Clara never goes out. You had better take yourself off before I send you." The boy, however, did not even budge and said, "I saw her. She has curly hair, black eyes, and talks in a funny way." "Oh," Sebastian chuckled to himself, "that was the little miss." Pulling the boy into the house, he said, "All right, you can follow me. Wait at the door till I call you, and then you can play something for Miss Clara." Knocking at the study door, Sebastian said, when he had entered, "A boy is here who wants to see Miss Clara." Clara, delighted at his interruption, said, "Can't he come right up, Mr. Candidate?" But the boy was already inside and started to play. Miss Rottenmeier was in the adjoining room when she heard the sounds. Where did they come from? Hurrying into the study, she saw the street boy playing to the eager children. "Stop, stop," she called, but in vain, for the music drowned her voice. Suddenly, she made a big jump, for there, between her feet, crawled a black turtle. Only when she shrieked for Sebastian could her voice be heard. The butler came straight in, for he had seen everything behind the door, and a great scene it had been. Glued to a chair in her fright, Miss Rottenmeier called, "Send the boy away! Take him away!" Sebastian obediently pulled the boy after him. Then he said, "Here are 40 pennies from Miss Clara, and 40 more for playing. It was well done, my boy." With that, he closed the door behind him. Miss Rottenmeier found it wiser now to stay in the study to prevent further disturbances. Suddenly, there was another knock at the door. Sebastian appeared with a large basket, which had been brought for Clara. "We had better have our lesson before we inspect it," said Miss Rottenmeier. But Clara, turning to the tutor, asked, "Oh, please, Mr. Candidate, can't we just peep in to see what it is?" "I am afraid that you'll think of nothing else," the teacher began. Just then, something in the basket, which had been only lightly fastened, moved, and 1, 2, 3, and still more little kittens jumped out, scampering around the room with the utmost speed. They bounded over the tutor's boots and bit his trousers. They climbed up on Miss Rottenmeier's dress and crawled around her feet. Meowing and running, they caused a frightful confusion. Clara called out in delight, "Oh, look at the cunning creatures. Look how they jump. Heidi, look at that one. Oh, and see that one over there." Heidi followed them about while the teacher shook them off. When the housekeeper had collected her wits after the great fright, she called for the servants. They soon arrived and stored the little kittens safely in the new bed. No time had been found for yawning that day either. When Miss Rottenmeier, who had found out the culprit, was alone with the children in the evening, she began severely. "Adelheid, there is only one punishment for you. I am going to send you to the cellar to think over your dreadful misdeeds in company with the rats." The cellar held no terrors for Heidi, for in her grandfather's cellar, fresh milk and the good cheese had been kept, and no rats had lodged there. But Clara shrieked, "Oh, Miss Rottenmeier, you must wait till Papa comes home, and then he can punish Heidi." The lady unwillingly replied, "All right, Clara, but I shall also speak a few words to Mr. Sesamon." With those words, she left the room. Since the child's arrival, everything had been upset, and the lady often felt discouraged, though nothing remarkable happened for a few days. Clara, on the contrary, enjoyed her companion's society, for she always did funny things. In her lesson, she could never get her letters straight. They meant absolutely nothing to her, except that they would remind her of goats and eagles. The girls always spent their evenings together, and Heidi would entertain her friend with tales of her former life, till her longing grew so great that she added, "I have to go home now. I must go tomorrow." Clara's soothing words and the prospect of more roles for the grandmother kept the child. Every day, after dinner, she was left alone in her room for some hours, thinking of the green fields at home, of the sparkling flowers on the mountains. She would sit in a corner till her desire for all those things became too great to bear. Her aunt had clearly told her that she might return if she wished to do so. So one day she resolved to leave for the alm hut. In a great hurry, she packed the bread in the red shawl and, putting on her old straw hat, started off. The poor child did not get very far. At the door, she encountered Miss Rottenmeier, who stared at Heidi in mute surprise. "What are you up to?" she exploded. "Haven't I forbidden you to run away? You look like a vagabond." "I was only going home," whispered the frightened child. "What? You want to run away from this house? What would Mr. Sesamon say? What is it that does not suit you here? Don't you get better treatment than you deserve? Have you ever before had such food, service, and such a room? Answer." "No," was the reply. "Don't I know that?" the furious lady proceeded. "What a thankless child you are, just idle and good for nothing." But Heidi could not bear it any longer. She loudly wailed, "Oh, I want to go home. What will poor Snowhopper do without me? Grandmother is waiting for me every day. Poor Thistlefinch gets blows if Peter gets no cheese, and I must see the sun again when he says good night to the mountains. How the eagle would screech if he saw all the people here in Frankfurt." "For mercy's sake, the child is crazy," exclaimed Miss Rottenmeier, running up the stairs. In her hurry, she had bumped into Sebastian, who was just then coming down. "Bring the unlucky child up," she called to him, rubbing her head. "All right, many thanks," answered the butler, rubbing his head too, for he had encountered something far harder than she had. When the butler came down, he saw Heidi standing near the door with flaming eyes, trembling all over. Cheerfully he asked, "What has happened, little one? Do not take it to heart, and cheer up. She nearly made a hole in my head just now, but we must not get discouraged. Oh, no. Come, up with you. She said so." Heidi walked upstairs very slowly. Seeing her so changed, Sebastian said, "Don't give in. Don't be so sad. You've been so courageous till now. I've never heard you cry yet. Come up now, and when the lady's away, we'll go and look at the kittens. They're running around like wild." Nodding cheerlessly, the child disappeared in her room. That night, at supper, Miss Rottenmeier watched Heidi constantly, but nothing happened. The child sat as quiet as a mouse, hardly touching her food, except the little roll. Talking with the tutor next morning, Miss Rottenmeier told him her fears about Heidi's mind. But the teacher had more serious troubles still, for Heidi had not even learned her ABC in all this time. Heidi was sorely in need of some clothes, so Clara had given her some. Miss Roddenmeyer was just busy arranging the child's wardrobe when she suddenly returned. "Adelheid," she said contemptuously, "what do I find? A big pile of bread in your wardrobe. I never heard the like." "Yes, Clara, it is true." Then, calling Tinette, she ordered her to take away the bread and the old straw hat she had found. "No, don't. I must keep my hat. The bread is for grandmother," cried Heidi in despair. "You stay here while we take the rubbish away," said the lady sternly. Heidi threw herself down now on Clara's chair and sobbed as if her heart would break. "Now I can't bring grandmother any rolls. Oh, they were for grandmother," she lamented. "Heidi, don't cry any more," Clara begged. "Listen, when you go home someday, I'm going to give you as many rolls as you had, and more. They will be much softer and better than those stale ones you have kept. Those were not fit to eat, Heidi. Stop now, please, and don't cry any more." Only after a long, long time did Heidi become quiet. When she had heard Clara's promise, she cried, "Are you really going to give me as many as I had?" At supper, Heidi's eyes were swollen, and it was still hard for her to keep from crying. Sebastian made strange signs to her that she did not understand. What did he mean? Later, though, when she climbed into her high bed, she found her old, beloved straw hat hidden under her cover. So Sebastian had saved it for her and had tried to tell her. She crushed it for joy and, wrapping it in a handkerchief, she hid it in the furthest corner of her wardrobe. Chapter 9. The master of the house hears of strange doings. A few days afterwards, there was great excitement in the Sesamon residence, for the master of the house had just arrived. The servants were taking upstairs one load after another, for Mr. Sesamon always brought many lovely things home with him. When he entered his daughter's room, Heidi shyly retreated into a corner. He greeted Clara affectionately, and she was equally delighted to see him, for she loved her father dearly. Then he called to Heidi, "Oh, there is our little Swiss girl. Come and give me your hand. That's right. Are you good friends, my girls? Tell me now. You don't fight together, huh?" "Oh, no, Clara is always kind to me," Heidi replied. "Heidi has never even tried to fight, Papa," Clara quickly remarked. "That's good. I like to hear that," said the father, rising. "I must get my dinner now, for I am hungry. I shall come back soon and show you what I have brought home with me." In the dining room, he found Miss Rottenmeier surveying the table with a most tragic face. "You do not look very happy at my arrival, Miss Rottenmeier. What is the matter? Clara seems well enough," he said to her. "Oh, Mr. Sesamon, we have been terribly disappointed," said the lady. "How do you mean?" asked Mr. Sesamon, calmly sipping his wine. "We had decided, as you know, to have a companion for Clara. Knowing, as I did, that you would wish me to get a noble, pure child, I thought of this Swiss child, hoping she would go through life like a breath of pure air, hardly touching the earth. I think that even Swiss children are made to touch the earth, otherwise they would have had to have wings. I think you understand what I mean, Mr. Sesamon. I have been terribly disappointed, for this child has brought the most frightful animals into the house. Mr. Candidate will tell you. The child does not look very terrible. What do you mean?" "I cannot explain it, because she does not seem in her right mind at times." Mr. Sesamon was getting worried at last when the tutor entered. "Oh, Mr. Candidate, I hope you will explain. Please take a cup of coffee with me and tell me about my daughter's companion. Make it short, though, if you please." But this was impossible for Mr. Candidate, who had to greet Mr. Sesamon first. Then he began to reassure his host about the child, pointing out to him that her education had been neglected till then, and so on. But poor Mr. Sesamon, unfortunately, did not get his answer and had to listen to very long-winded explanations of the child's character. At last, Mr. Sesamon got up, saying, "Excuse me, Mr. Candidate, but I must go over to Clara now." He found the children in the study. Turning to Heidi, who had risen at his approach, he said, "Come, little one, get me a glass of water." "Fresh water?" "Of course, fresh water," he replied. When Heidi had gone, he sat down near Clara, holding her hand. "Tell me, little Clara," he asked, "please tell me clearly what animals Heidi has brought into the house. Is she really not right in her mind?" Clara now began to relate to her father all the incidents with the kittens and the turtle, and explained Heidi's speeches that had so frightened the lady. Mr. Sesamon laughed heartily and asked Clara if she wished Heidi to remain. "Of course, Papa. Since she is here, something amusing happens every day. They used to be so dull, but now Heidi keeps me company." Very good, Clara. Oh, here is your friend back again. Did you get nice fresh water?" asked Mr. Sesamon. Heidi handed him the glass and said, "Yes, fresh from the fountain." "You did not go to the fountain yourself, Heidi," said Clara. "Certainly, but I had to get it from far. There were so many people at the first and the second fountain. I had to go down another street, and there I got it. A gentleman with white hair sends his regards to you, Mr. Sesamon." Clara's father laughed and asked, "Who is the gentleman?" "When he passed by the fountain and saw me there with a glass, he stood still and said, 'Please give me a drink, for you have a glass. To whom are you bringing the water?' Then I said, 'I'm bringing it to Mr. Sesamon.' When he heard that, he laughed very loud and gave me his regards for you, with the wish that you would enjoy your drink. I wonder who it was. What did the gentleman look like?" "He has a friendly laugh and wears a gold pendant with a red stone on a thick gold chain. There is a horse head on his cane." "Oh, that was the doctor. That was my old doctor," exclaimed father and daughter at the same time. In the evening, Mr. Sesamon told Miss Rottenmeier that Heidi was going to remain, for the children were very fond of each other, and he found Heidi normal and very sweet. "I want the child to be treated kindly," Mr. Sesamon added decidedly. "Her peculiarities must not be punished. My mother is coming very soon to stay here, and she will help you to manage the child, for there is nobody in this world that my mother could not get along with, as you know, Miss Rottenmeier." "Of course I know that, Mr. Sesamon," replied the lady, but she was not very pleased at the prospect. Mr. Sesamon only stayed 2 weeks, for his business called him back to Paris. He consoled his daughter by telling her that his mother was coming in a few days. Mr. Sesamon had hardly left when the grandmother's visit was announced for the following day. Clara was looking forward to this visit and told Heidi so much about her dear grandmama that Heidi also began to call her by that name, to Miss Rottenmeier's disapproval, who thought that the child was not entitled to this intimacy.